Hey guys, so I'm back with another video about whether Sergey Ivancheglo is Satoshi Nakamoto. I know I did a video already on this. It's not going to be the focus of this channel forever. I've got some Qubic videos that will be coming up soon, but I just want to talk about it in this video because it's interesting. I've been looking into it a lot, and I found some more evidence that I think adds to it. I just think it's an interesting conversation. So we're going to discuss that in this video. By the way, I know not all of you are into this, and don't feel like you have to watch this video if you're not into it. But I think if you're a Qubic holder, this is really interesting to think of the bigger picture of Qubic. And I also think it's interesting from the point of view, even if Sergey Ivancheglo isn't Satoshi, it's really interesting to see how long he's been in this space and how big of an influence and how long he's been messing about in this space. As a Qubic holder, that's really important because obviously that means that you've got someone who's had a long-term plan and has a lot of influence. So we're going to talk about that in this video. Let's get into it. Yeah, guys, so I've been sharing some of these posts on X recently, and people fall into two camps. People who are excited about it, agree with me, or maybe they disagree, but they're excited and interested in the conversation. And then people that are like, why are you talking about this? It's ridiculous. I don't, it's all rubbish. Now, generally, the people who think it's all rubbish just haven't looked at the evidence or the facts, and they've brought their own personal bias into it, I think, as well. If you look at the evidence and the facts, there's no way that you can say he's definitely not Satoshi. That's ridiculous. You're probably going to look and go, wow, there's a good chance he is Satoshi. Maybe it's only a 10% chance. But from what I can see, and I haven't studied this in detail with everyone else, but it looks like he's one of the strongest cases to be Satoshi. And some of the stuff I'm going to tell you in this video, I think is just mind blowing. And really, I think by the end of it, you're going to be like, wow, there's a good chance he is Satoshi. And the bigger picture of it is, the reason I'm talking about this stuff is because if Sergey Ivancheglo turns out to be Satoshi Nakamoto, whatever project he's working on now is going to blow up. But also, if Sergey Ivancheglo isn't Satoshi, but just this evidence is presented as I have presented it, and you can see how long he's been working this space, building out plans, and how big of ideas he has, you're going to clearly see, oh, hey, this guy, the Qubic's going to be huge because this guy has great ideas. So anyway, I started on Twitter and I just said that I know most people are sick of this kind of conversation, and I know it's annoying. And if I had to guess, I'd say CFB isn't Satoshi. That's what I'm going to say. I can't really say, what everyone. I'd be like, most likely they're not. But none of us know who Satoshi is. So for now, we have to say we don't know. So I would say, yeah, CFB probably not Satoshi, but the evidence is interesting. And I just say that I've been fascinated with the evidence. There's some really strong evidence in his favor, and it's just been really gripping me. And then I said, read below, but watch this video without any personal bias in place. So you might hate Sergey Ivancheglo. You might not be invested in Qubic. You might hate Qubic. Maybe you're invested in Qubic, but you don't want to care about the Satoshi debate. But just watch this with an open mind, without any bias, and just tell me that it isn't at least very interesting what I'm going to share with you. So Satoshi Nakamoto mentioned being aware of the cypherpunk movement from a young age in an email from 2008. He wrote, I've been working on Bitcoin since 2007. I was fascinated by cypherpunks when I was about 14. Now, Sergey Ivancheglo was born in 1979. Satoshi was 14 during the height of the cypherpunk movement. It would have been in the early to mid 90s. So if you're thinking early to mid 90s at 14, come from beyond, that would have went to 1993 around that time. So that matches up. So we're guessing that quite clearly, if, as they say here, if it isn't meant to be a deliberate misdirection and he isn't lying about his age, which I find hard to believe when he's writing these personal emails to Hal Finney at the time, he said that he was 14 when cypherpunks were around. The timelines match up that Sergey Ivancheglo would make sense. And that wipes out a lot of people, but Sergey Ivancheglo is one of the people that doesn't wipe out. Just a small clue there, not one of the most impressive ones I'm going to give you. Then we see from Satoshi Nakamoto again to Hal Finney, and he's just talking about, this is on Monday, January 12th, 2009, And he just goes on in an email, says a few things, and then he just says that people now are going to be able to create customized Bitcoin addresses. And he said, just by chance, I have my initials. Kind of very cryptic the way he wrote that, by the way. He didn't say, just by chance, I put my initials into it. He said, just by chance, I have my initials. Quite cryptic, and leaves it open, almost like he's purposefully leaving that part a little bit cryptic. So remember, 12th of January. Then 13th of January, so one day after that, this Bitcoin address appears. Now remember, this is right at the start. There's nearly no Bitcoin addresses, and especially no vanity addresses. So a vanity address is a personally created Bitcoin address where you put in some of your own information. Any Bitcoin address up to this point, most of them were addresses that were just automatically created, but whoever was creating these addresses very early on knew a lot about Bitcoin and had a lot of insider information on it. So look, one day after this email sent about having their initials in the email, this one pops up the day after, and it's got CFB in there. Now, if you guys know CFB, that's Come From Beyond, which is Sergey Ivancheglo, which is the name he uses. He uses many names, but Come From Beyond is his really well-known name on X. Everywhere he used that name. He's been using that name since 2002, by the way. So almost definitely that name is this is his wallet. And it's got $5 million just sitting in it right now, never touched. There's actually, he's told us some other stuff in here that is really interesting, and I won't go into it, but you can look into it yourself, that actually, if you take Russian language, this would mean 1 CFB, 2 Satoshi Nakamoto, which is just anyway, I'm not going to even go into that, but that's just an interesting thing. But the main point that I want to make is the day after Satoshi Nakamoto sends this email, says, just by chance, I have my initials. Doesn't even say I put my initials into address just a minute ago. We get this Bitcoin address. Mind blowing. I think anyway. Then we go to 3rd of January 2009. So we're going back in time here. That's the date when Satoshi Nakamoto mined the starting block of the chain known as Jan's block of what is Bitcoin. So Bitcoin basically was created on this date. That's when it started off. Now you go to 6 days after Bitcoin was created, and you get this address, 15 Qubic, BBW, which I think Big Beautiful Women or something like that. There is some Russian hidden in here again, but I'm not going to go into this in detail. But that NVOCLT, apparently in Russian, that is very similar to new gold, but I'm not going to go into that in too much detail. There's probably other stuff hidden in here. Who knows? But this one's the interesting one, 15 Qubic. I mean, it looks like it almost says Qubic, and that fascinated me. And another $5 million just sitting in there, like just exactly like this other wallet. That blew my mind. So then online, a lot of us were trying to figure out, what does this mean? And I had some kind of ridiculous ideas. I was saying if you take 1 from 5, you get a 4. Kind of looks like a Q. Lots of people were saying other things, but none of it really felt like it made sense. Until this guy, Samson, who's a Qubic follower online, said, check it out. And he figured it out. And he said, definitely cooking back then. And he figured out this thing called base 58 encoding. So basically what base 58 is, every Bitcoin vanity address. So when you take a Bitcoin address like this one that's been custom created, it had to use this thing called base 58. And basically with base 58, that capital I and that capital O were removed from the coding. So, I should go back and say here, the first logical thing that you would think is 15. Okay, well, it's Q, the 15th letter in the alphabet. That would be the logical thing. But it turns out that Q isn't. Q's the, I can't remember. Q's the 17th letter in the alphabet. So it should have been 17. So that was off-putting. But then when you realize that the base 58 characters that are used to create a Bitcoin vanity address remove the I and the O, that's 2 letters gone, and all of a sudden you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Look at that. Now, every Bitcoin address has to start with a 1, by the way. So it's like he wanted to get that 1 and that 5 to be a Q so that the address actually started with the Q for Qubic. I mean, that's mind blowing, isn't it? That's 6 days after Bitcoin was created, an address was created that 99.999% say was Sergey Ivancheglo's address, and it has Qubic at the start of the address and it's hidden in code. So, meaning that in base 58, the 15th letter of the alphabet is Q. That's mind blowing. That's like that to me. That's not even up for debate. That's clearly what he did there, is that he hid the name Qubic in the base 58 code. And I'm going to show you, and I've showed in other videos. Sergey Ivancheglo was talking about Qubic a long, long time, had this plan for a long, long time, and had the idea of the quorum for a long, long time, and he had the idea for useful proof of work for a long, long time, like long before even Bitcoin existed. So then we go to another thing from Satoshi Nakamoto here. So Saturday, April 23rd, 2011, he sends the last email that he ever sent and said, I moved on to other things. Nothing else that we need to see in that, just that he moved on to other things. I think it's just in good hands. But anyway, then if we look at Come From Beyond, so there's this forum, if you don't know, it's called Bitcoin Talk, and it's like the forum where everyone hung out talking about Bitcoin and crypto initially. And it was created, this forum, by Satoshi Nakamoto, and it was go-to place to talk about crypto. So everyone who was in crypto was on that site at that time. But Come From Beyond did not create their account, didn't register their account till November of 2011. So like 5 months, or was 7 months after Satoshi Nakamoto left Bitcoin. Interestingly as well, created it, a day before, if you count in the month, which I just think is interesting as well. But look, that to me is really interesting. Is it not interesting to you? Because think about this. Come From Beyond, we know that they are involved in Bitcoin because, for example, even if you don't believe the Qubic thing, they've got their initials in here, CFB, and CFB has said, yeah, I own that address, basically. They've created that only a few days after Bitcoin was created. And then you've got him not coming on to the main forum about Bitcoin till the end of 2011. So he was clearly, like, again, I don't feel like it's up for debate, but maybe some of you guys would debate this, but he had to be on this site talking to people, but he had to be using a different name. So think about, what name was he using? I mean, Satoshi disappears, Come From Beyond appears on it. I mean, maybe some of you guys listening don't understand the significance of that. It's probably just because you haven't looked into it enough and thought about it enough, but that is really significant. He, Come From Beyond, had to be on the site. And again, if you take the initials Come From Beyond, you I think it's, you put them backwards and you flip them, they say Bitcoin, or BTC, which is just so interesting as well. But I mean, that to me is it's really interesting, and you should just think about it if it doesn't blow your mind. He had to be on that site before that. There's no way he couldn't have been, because he was so involved in Bitcoin, but he didn't register till the end of the year that Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared. So I went on to say, now think about that. We have verified proof that CFB created wallets with initial CFB and 15 Qubic in them back in 2009. And they were actually mining Bitcoin at that time. We know that. So they're probably like close to a billionaire with what they mined back then, because for every block reward, I think he got like 50 Bitcoin back then. But they don't appear on Bitcoin Talk till 2011. Bitcoin Talk is the place where anyone with any interest in Bitcoin hung out and talked back in the day. I mean, this is before the internet was like it is now. Forums were the way to go. So there's zero chance, in my opinion, that CFB wasn't on there. But he wasn't in Bitcoin Talk using the CFB name until 2011. He had to be using a different name. And then Satoshi disappears in 2011. CFB appears. How interesting is that? Then the crypto project NXT launches in 2013. So think, Satoshi Nakamoto started Bitcoin in 2007. Took 2 years to develop in 2009. Nakamoto disappears in 2011. 2 years later, the crypto NXT launches. So a 2-year space again. But this time is created by someone called BC Next, which, clearly would seem like Bitcoin Next. And by the way, I have to state this. Sergey Ivancheglo is really shown that from things like, you even see it with the 15 Ubik, but you see it with lots of things he does, or even the come from beyond, flipping into to actually saying Bitcoin. He shows a real interest in hiding the truth in plain sight and enjoying the game of it all. So, BC next, meaning Bitcoin next, is quite clear, but then he's also, someone was trying to infer here, it would seem that like what the next thing that Satoshi went to work on, it could be like that anyway. But anyway, so the timeline works out 2 years from 2011 spent working in NXT. So Satoshi Nakamoto would have spent 2 years then from 2011 working on NXT. People think it is ridiculous that CFB could be BC Next. What I mean by that is people at the time thought that it was ridiculous that CFB could be BC Next. There was claims about it. People in IOTA and stuff like that were saying, yeah, I think this guy's him, but people were like, no way, BC Next was this, was that, no way. At the time, NXT, I think, was top 3 crypto. People really believed that CFB wasn't BC Next, but then in 2017, he signs a wallet and proves that, or an address, I don't understand all that stuff in too much detail, and he proved that he was BC Next all along, like definitively signed a wallet. There was one of BC Next wallets, and it was just proven. So we know he's BC Next. So that proves that for that space of 4 years, he kept an identity secret, and he kept a project secret for several years before that. And that whole time, no one knew who he was. I mean, that's mind-blowing to me as well. So the conclusion I have on a lot of that is, I know many people out there will say, CFB's personality doesn't match Satoshi's. And you just have to remember, you most likely have not met either of these people. You're just interacting with online personalities who are playing about. Much of CFB's early work is very serious and well written. And people will say, I haven't read it, but I'm going to start reading it. If you go on Bitcoin Talk and you see BCX commenting, who is proven to be Sergey Ivancheglo, who has come from beyond, that he spoke very like Satoshi Nakamoto and spoke really well and really serious and really to the point and wasn't talking rubbish. I mean, it seems like a logical conclusion that one of the biggest developments that came after Bitcoin a few years after would be what Satoshi Nakamoto went to work on. And also, I'm sure some of you guys might have saw in the last video, it's Sergey Ivancheglo has a middle name which begins with an N, which he says, yeah, that's what I was up to. That's how I came up with those initials, which is just interesting as well. So then this is just some of what was actually written by Sergey Ivancheglo. By the way, yeah, I keep, there's so much information, I just don't want to go and overdo it here, but this is like some of the things that were written by Sergey Ivancheglo back in the day, like really, really well written. This was before Bitcoin existed. He writes the stuff really well. Another one, then he's talking about Qubic back in 2012. Again, really well written, which is interesting. Again, not written by a guy that doesn't look like he knows English, or that like the CFB that we know these days. But that is factually written by Sergey Ivancheglo back in 2012. Already talking about Qubic, already talking about Quorum. So then what I just thought was interesting here is that you'll see this was written by Sergey Ivancheglo as well. And now in here, he's using text talk. And you see it in a lot of Sergey Ivancheglo. Then when he's talking about Come From Beyond, he started using text talk. Like he was trying to cover over like how he using different speaking styles. Which is just interesting. But he said that he went in here to talk about BC Next, real identity. He said Bitcoin was a genius invention, but implementation became corrupted by people whose aim was to make money, not Bitcoins, but dollars. BC Next. Now, so Sergey Ivancheglo wrote this about BC Next, which is just interesting. So he said, but kind of saying that he looked and saw inside what BC Next was up to, which is just interesting. Anyway, but he said BC Next was working on a project that required that Bitcoin would change society and prepare ground for project. Half a year ago, it became crystal clear for him. No, I think I have this actually in here at the end of this document. I want to get here. Yes, I have it there. Okay, that's where I want to read it from. So, BC Next was working. Sorry, I just messed up when I was doing these slides. BC Next was working on a project that required special conditions for its existence. He hoped that Bitcoin would change society and prepare ground for the project. Half a year ago, it became crystal clear for him that Bitcoin as an idea of trustless money had failed. Interesting. That came interesting. That he thought that Bitcoin had failed. A fix was required, and it came in the form of transparent mining. Transparent is the key word here. It changes focus from trust no one to don't let the cheat, because any cheating becomes obvious very soon. Blah, 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 blah. And he's just talking about NXT and why it was really interesting. Bitcoin relies only on math, but math can't solve problems. Blah, blah, blah. And talk about the problems with Bitcoin. Now, when you know why NXT was created, you should choose what way to follow. The easiest one is to repeat the history of Bitcoin and hope that something will change. The alternative is to implement transparent mining and try to handle people imperfection. The latter can't be done with pure math, and even if you manage to find some laws, you can't do these things. BC Next, so this is the interesting stuff. BC Next went for good. He doesn't feel himself responsible for the future of NXT. He implemented an idea that was obvious, but no one tried to do it. Maybe because creation of a Bitcoin clone was much easier. One day he will come back with his main project under his real name. That's an interesting line, isn't it? He's going to come back with his main project under his real name. Now remember, this is written in 2014, before people knew that CFB was BC Next. It's written by CFB, and he's talking about in 2012 about Qubic, and now he's saying that BC Next one day will come back with his main project under his real name. Don't try to find the real identity of BC Next. He intentionally copied style and ideas of different people, meaning that he copied his writing style, probably his programming style, so that's not easy to find him. If you think you found him, then you're likely wrong. BC Next has never existed. This socks puppet was created only for NXT and will never appear again. The plan always was very simple. Show the way that very obvious but avoided for some reason. BC Next doesn't pretend that he possesses sacred knowledges and knows what's waiting at the end. You're left on your own. Good luck. But, BC Next being a fake character, which is just... Look, I just think that's mind-blowing. This is him talking about BC Next before he reveals that he's BC Next in 2017 and saying that he's going to come back with his main project under his real name. And now he's back with Qubic and he's using his real name. Just blows my mind. Then if we go here, so from 2012, we can see again him writing very clearly. It says, anyone who's familiar with Bitcoin technical details that knows that most of the settings are carved in stone. A block solution takes 10 minutes, blah, 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 blah. But then he goes down here, and this is 2012 again. Qubic is designed in a way that any Qubicer can change settings of their own providers, rewards for new transactions, all this sort of stuff. But what's interesting is this is 2012. He's talking about quorum. He's talking about how you can change the number of words, that all the parameters can be changed. Then you fast forward 12 years, and what happened with Qubic? They took the max supply, which was 1 quadrillion, and they've reduced that max supply to 200 trillion. So it was adaptable, something that could never be done with Bitcoin. And he was talking about that back in 2012. I know that doesn't equal anything got to do with the Satoshi story, but the reason I'm putting it in there is that this guy is back so long ago, has this plan in place that he's implementing. I want to go back to this one here. So then there was a article by Cointelegraph that explored some of the code in Bitcoin, found a proxy that was being used, and using that proxy, they found that it was a Russian proxy. Now, this is debatable, by the way. Not 100% certain that this is right, but they found that this proxy was a Russian proxy, and it turned out that it was being used by someone called Sergey in 2008, and they were in Vietnam. And now I know there's people actually going and trying to find the records for that hotel because they know the hotel now, from 2008, and see can they find the name Sergey Ivancheglo in there, which... if they do, that'd be mind-blowing. I know it seems like conspiratorial stuff, guys, but it's really not. There's nothing conspiratorial I'm saying here. I'm saying I don't know if he's Satoshi Nakamoto, but the thing I'm trying to present to you here is there's so much information that links him to it, so much in terms of his timelines. At the end of this video, I'll link the last video that I did, which goes into way more topics on why he might be Satoshi Nakamoto. But the big picture as a Qubic holder is that this guy had a plan for a long, long, long time, and he thinks, and the plan was always that his ultimate project was Qubic, and he thinks that he's hitting that now. And I just think that's a reason to be really, really bullish in Qubic. But time will tell. That video is going to appear on screen now. The other one that I did about Satoshi Nakamoto, I recommend checking that out. And that's all I've got for you today, guys. I'll see you all on the outside.